MLB draft extravaganza. I'm Lindsay Crosby, host of Locked On MLB Prospects. He's Jeff Ellis, host of Locked On Guardians and MLB Draft Extraordinaire. And Jeff, just right off the top, what a wild first round. We're not even done yet, obviously. We're recording this at a 9:02. We're going live on YouTube right now, but a couple surprises there in the first round, including Kumar Rocker going third overall. Your thoughts on just kind of some of this early results here from the draft?
No, it was the crazy draft we expected. I mean, right now, I think it all gets summed up best with the fact that the Vegas odds on the top overall pick went through 3 different players in the last 48 hours, and then the player selected was none of those 3. And we've still got a consensus top 10 guy who we're sitting here, I think, picked. I know Jeff's helping us, but I'm sure he's a little distracted right now, as I believe the Reds are on the clock. It's like, did the Reds push Cam Collier down this thing? Did they promise him some money to get him down? I mean, it's just, we have a consensus top 10 prospect still left, very similar to a year ago at this time. And then we have, I think, a lot of curveballs or sliders, if you're talking Cade Horton and Gabriel Hughes. I mean, there's so many ways to go. It's been very interesting. I think the best thing I did to prepare for this was I did an 80 pick mock draft last night, and just to go through and look at the names for this class and to see how quickly it starts to peter out in the second round. So I'm a little bit surprised that we're seeing a lot of teams, it looks like, go a little under slot early.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get right into that. You kind of mentioned some of the guys going under slot early. The first one, and the first real big surprise, other than Drew Jones not being number 1, I think was Kumar Rocker at number 3 to the Rangers. Now, from what I understand, saw some stuff from Bryce Patrick, our host of Locked On Rangers. He was talking about the Rangers got the medicals for Kumar Rocker, and the deal came into about $2 million under slot. So it's something where I just find it really interesting that he went, like we were discussing, where in the first round does Kumar Rocker go? And then there he goes, he drops in at number 3. Is that too high for Kumar Rocker? Do you think the $2 million savings makes it worth it? And do you feel better since they got the medicals for him to go ahead and make that pick at 3?
No, because plain and simply, even if he was Kumar Rocker of a year ago and 100% healthy, he wouldn't be the third best player in this class. So for me, I just look at this as like, even the Kumar Rocker that we saw a year ago, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out my camera angles here, wasn't worth being the third player in this class. And yeah, $2 million is a nice amount of savings, but Kumar Rocker, that still means he's getting $5.59 million. That's a big chunk of change for a guy who, he fell to 10 last year for a reason. That was before the medicals. Like, he's not a clean prospect. So yeah, they see the medicals. Yeah, that made them feel better, but it still feels like an overdraft and an overpay. But maybe I'm just being too negative here. What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I think that he's shown the talent. And for me, the question was medical. Was he healthy? Did he know? And it's a very interesting situation as far as comps. Like, when you watch him pitch, I very much think of like an Alex Manoah type, where big bodied guy throws a ton of strikes. And I'm just I like the pick. I think it's interesting that you have now Rocker and Leiter. I'm still not 100% sure if I'm cool with it being at number 3. Like you said, it is still $5.5 million. And there's something there that scared the Mets away from giving him an offer at all last year. And we know the Mets aren't afraid to spend money. So as of now, I like it. And I think I like it because I don't have the big concern that I had, I think, has been covered. But I ultimately don't think we have a final answer on this in a good, 3 to 5 years. We just don't necessarily know what's the health of that arm going to do long-term, that elbow, that shoulder. And so what happens from there? Interesting one that I want to talk to you about. I've heard a lot of stuff. A lot of folks loved this, but Tamar Johnson at 4 to the Pirates. So they announced him as a shortstop. He talked about he wants to be the shortstop of the future. I think we're in agreement he's a second baseman. And so that makes him the highest ever selection for a second baseman. How do you feel about Tamar Johnson at 4 to the Pirates?
So, I mean, I think it's a great pick. Again, he was the third player overall in this class to me, so I'm not gonna have a problem with them taking him at 4. There were guys I liked maybe a little bit better, but they were all so closely graded. I thought, you look at what he brings to the table just in terms of an advanced approach. Uh, like you're looking at a chance for plus hit plus power.
Mhm.
He's a potential, middle of the order all-star type of hitter. Position was always a question. There's going to be some doubters because of his size. So I think that, I thought it was a strong pick. I don't know if it's necessarily like my favorite pick, just because often, like, let's be honest, your favorite pick is that guy who slid. It's going to be someone who's more of a value. But I think the Pirates did really well, and I think when you get right down to it, like I really like what they did there. Just the offensive profile is as good as anyone in this class.
Yeah, and I think it's something where, and I'm a little guilty of this too, is kind of looking at everything else and forgetting about the hit tool and how good the hit tool was. We talked about 70 grade. We talked about maybe, like I saw 1 or 2 reports that had an 80 grade, but most of it was kind of consensus 70 grade around the hit tool, looking at like a 60 grade for the power. And it's something where I'm like, oh yeah, well, the physical attributes, we're struggling here. Well, he's stuck defensively at second. Like, well, if you're a good enough hitter, it doesn't matter what position you play. And so I think part of that was just us and me, among many people who did this, focusing too much on the minutia and for like focused on the trees instead of the forest. The forest is, this is a dude with an amazing hit tool that is going to rake for a long time. And I got too worked up on the little things like, how tall he is, or he's playing second instead of short. So I think it was a big pick. Cam Collier finally off the board to the Reds. Fantastic news there. So, all right, looking at the back half of the top 10, and I have a couple picks out of here that I'm saving for the next segment for the picks I like and picks I think were risky. But back half, Elijah Green at 5 to Washington. Jacob Berry goes at 6 to the Marlins. Cade Horton to the Cubs at 7. Brooks Lee to the Twins at 8. Gavin Cross to Kansas City at 9. Gabriel Hughes to the Rockies. Right there, what of those stands out to you as that was a great selection and just kind of like a good fit for the team?
Brooks Lee, just in terms of the value, it's like we know he's gonna hit. We know that he's gonna move quickly. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he has to move off of shortstop. Like the odds are not in his favor, but I think there's a chance he becomes a short. He's able to stick there. So you're looking at just a very safe profile, a guy who, he would have been a high pick out of high school if he didn't want to go pay for his dad at Cal Poly. To me, that's the standout in the second half of the background. I think the most interesting thing is I've been doing this for 14 years now. This is the worst college group I've ever seen. And we have 3 college pitchers go in the top 10, which it's unbelievable. So especially when you have like 2 in the back half of that top 10.
Yeah.
It was an interesting grouping overall. I didn't actually love the back half of the top 10, if I'm being honest.
Well, Jeff, you're talking to the guy who recorded a promo that played for like every Locked On baseball show that we have, that said we may not have a pitcher taken in the top 10 for the first time since the draft was instituted in the 60s. And here we are, number 3, number 7, number 10. And so 3 of them go. I did find it interesting. There's that big run of college players. You start with 6 with Jacob Berry, and you go all the way through 13, nothing but college players. So you got
9 in a row.
9 in a row. You've got 3 prep guys in your first 4, and then a bunch of college players.
Sorry, it was 9 out of 13, and then 8 in a row.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's wild to me, and it almost goes against some of this, like we talked about the features of this class, where it was strong, where it was weak. And so looking at this 11 through 18, 19, 20 or so, but the first half of that second group, Kevin Parada at 11 to the Mets. Jace Young falls to 12 with the Tigers. Zach Neto, not a pitcher for the Angels at 13, just because it wasn't the right place on the board for a pitcher. Jet Williams back into the preps at 14. And then the first prep pitcher off the board, Dylan Lesko for San Diego at 15. I think for me, and I'm going to hold Kevin Parada for the next segment. I love the Dylan Lesko pick at 15. So AJ Preller with San Diego, they've done this before. This is the thing they did with Cal Quantrill. They take a guy in the first round who's been, who is having TJ, but was seen as a candidate to be the number 1 overall pick in this draft before he got hurt. They take him at 15. You have to think they're going to get good value there, even if he doesn't give a discount because he can go to college. You probably get a discount because he's rehabbing from TJ, and you get a consensus top 3, top 5 talent when he's healthy. Your thoughts about that 11 through 15 there?
And one concern with Lesko is I know they're better at it now, but that Padres pitching developmental system is what has been one of the worst in baseball. So you're putting a guy in there. Now they've done a lot. When I threw out that tweet, Rob Marcello was brought up, and Ruben Niebla, who left Cleveland, is fantastic. They're doing a lot to fix that, but I'm still waiting. I mean, Mackenzie Gores is the only home run guy. There's a reason why, even though they've drafted all of these pitchers, they have to keep going and trading for pitching. In that grouping, listen, Jet Williams was a top 10 player on my board. I was alone in this, but he's 5'8". If he was 5'10", we'd be having very similar discussions about him and Tamar Johnson being like they're a comp for each other. They're very, very similar types, and just in terms of approach and size and position and athleticism, I mean, he might be a better pure athlete than Tamar. Tamar's a better hitter, but it's not a huge gap in either of those things. So to get him at 14 after grabbing Parada, they got 2 top 10 players for me. And, the Mets, they're just killing it. And if you sat there and looked at the grade I gave Kumar Rocker a year ago and the grade I gave Parada this year, Parada had the higher grade. Like to me, those are fantastic picks. When I'm looking at those, I going through there, I mean, Jung was a top 10 prospect in this class to me as well. I thought this was due to some of those surprise picks. There were some really talented players to get through.
Absolutely. And okay, before I get to like the back half of that first round of that 15 through 20, I want to give you a second. Chase DeLauter going to your Guardians at 16. Your thoughts? One, am I saying his name wrong? Is it DeLauter or DeLauter?
I always think it's DeLauter, but I could be wrong.
Okay. I usually get names wrong. That's kind of
I do too. So it's that's we my listeners know that that's the case. So it's funny if you go back when we did our mock draft together. That's who I mocked to the Guardians. I don't know if you remember that.
You nailed it. Yeah,
I know. But then I didn't follow through on either of my mocks today with him there. But he always fit. And the reason, and a lot of people, I've been hopping around all day, and everyone's like, you seem a little down. It's like, it's nothing to do with DeLauter. It's just I was a big Collier guy. Now it's very clear that Collier was floated down the board to the Reds, so that worked out well for the Reds. DeLauter was the 3rd best player left on my board. He is. And for everything I talked about on that show, the Guardians really value the Cape. He was a monster. Like at the end of the Cape last year, you just said this is a top 3 pick.
That's exactly where I was about to go. That's
what it comes to. And he gets, in my opinion, he gets unnecessarily beat up because those Florida State lefties kicked his butt. But they kicked everyone's butt. And like, it's hard. Like how many lefties struggle against lefties together? Those are 2 funky guys who are probably going to go in the 2nd or 3rd. Who look like future major, like those are hard for anyone to face. So to sit there and be like, that's the only competition he faced and he struggled. Well, it's like everyone struggled against that pairing. It's not like you're going to base one weekend instead of the Cape where he faced also really good competition and just destroyed it. Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think, like I said, he's the number 3 player on my board. I'm fine. If everything works out, he's an all-star. And a lot of Guardians fans are very quick to be like, oh, it's Bradley Zimmer all over again. Just wait. Bradley Zimmer at University of San Francisco, a small school program, was striking out 30% of the time even then. DeLauter has had more walks than strikeouts, and strikeout percentage is under 20% for his entire career. So just deep breath. It'll be okay. And if anyone took it as me not being excited, no, I think he's a fantastic pick. It was just more about who was still on the board.
Yeah. And context to some of those Cape Cod stats. So 34 games in 2021 for the Orleans Firebirds. Bats 298, 9 home runs. And then to your point of the more walks than strikeouts, 21 walks to 18 strikeouts in 34 games. So 7 doubles, 1 triple, 9 home runs, hits for plenty of power, walks more than he strikes out, gets on base plenty. So you have to absolutely love that. He did actually pitch 4 innings as well. Didn't go great. He may be an option for you guys as a position player pitching in blowouts. I don't think he's going to be your next Shohei Ohtani, though. So
we're hoping Will Brennan does that role. former Kansas State lefty. That's our go-to guy.
There you go. So as we're looking at, all right, so we've got obviously Justin Crawford at 17 to the Phillies, Cam Collier 18 to Cincinnati, Daniel Susac at 19, and the Braves, literally the pick is in and we just don't quite have it yet. Hey, Katie, we have some of the chat comments coming up on the side over here. Katie listens every day. Love it. So Justin Crawford, are we surprised that he dropped? Or is this something where I think everybody was kind of overplaying the son of a big leaguer thing?
If you're curious, Owen Murphy, who's a player I'm really high on, is who the Braves are going to grab right here. Just to put it out ahead of time. I don't even think it's been broadcast, but Owen Murphy is going to go here. I think for Crawford, this is about fair range, but I think what's really interesting with that Crawford pick is so now that Williams and Crawford are gone, it is a huge gap to that next prep position player. Like the next guy on my board is way down the board. So if you were looking at kind of a higher ceiling prep guy, this is where, you're looking, I guess there's still Tucker Tolman. I don't know if he's necessarily ceiling, but you have him, he's kind of in this range, but after him, it really, it depends on how much you look at some other ones, but yeah, I think it's about the right space for him. I think this Braves pick, if once it's formally made, we can get into it. I think this is one of the most underrated prospects in the draft. So I really like what the Braves are doing here.
I actually would love to get into this. So once they announce this, so Owen Murphy, 6'1", 178, Notre Dame commit. Obviously, pretty sure you go in the first round. You're not going to, you already have a deal in place. You're not going to go. But so he's got a high spin fastball, velos 91 to 94, big 11 to 5, slurve looking curveball, and then has a cutter, in a changeup, doesn't throw him a ton because he's done everything with the fastball and the curveball. What do you think the ceiling is for a guy that was on boards in the 40s or 50s talent wise that's now going at 20?
So I had him 37. Sorry, just had a momentary brain moment. So yeah, I had him at 37. I think he is, when you're looking at him, the interesting thing is like as a third baseman, he would have also been drafted. Like he is just one of those athlete types. And yeah, he is small, but we're seeing a change in the view on right-handed pitchers. There's a few years ago, like Cade Horton, who's also 6'1", would have been, that would have made him automatically not a first rounder. And you're looking at Murphy, it's just he's a guy on the rise. He is the cold weather arm plus athlete. Like I said, a legitimate two-way type, maybe the best two-way hitter, a two-way player in this year's class. And yeah, the 6'1" is the issue, but we're seeing that matter less and less. So that's absolutely fascinating. Like I said, I don't think many people expected him to be the number 2 prep arm off the board over Berea, over Brock Porter, who's still sitting there, over, I had him as my 5th best prep arm, and I thought I was aggressive with him. So very interesting. And if you're seeing the stats, how about the fact they had 137 strikeouts to just 4 walks this year? Like, it's high school
it's prep
level
stats, but still,
but even
stats.
Gaudy stats for even his level.
Yeah. So real quick, before we take a quick message here and then go to our picks we like and picks we think were risky. Quick question in the chat from John Martin. I love this question. How quickly do players drafted in the top 10 get put on 40-man roster? So the way that this works, really interesting here, is if you're drafted at age 18 or younger, or you sign at age 18 or younger, you have to be added to the 40-man roster within 5 seasons, or else you become eligible for the Rule 5 draft. If you sign at age 19 or older, it's 4 seasons. So if you draft somebody this year, 23, 24, 25, 26, you're good. At the end of the 2027 season, if they were a prep player, or the 26 season, if they were 19 or older, is when you have to make the decision, do we put them on the 40-man, or are they now subject to the Rule 5 draft? So you have some time on these guys. And usually it's something where a year or 2 out, you typically have an idea when it's time to make the decision, we're going to to protect this guy or not. You're kind of aware of that usually. So in just a second, I want to get to the picks that we like and the picks that we think were risky. I've got a couple up here but first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Blue Nile. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. And then Blue Nile's bench jewelers will handcraft her perfect engagement ring, and each ring is one of a kind. If you're looking for fine jewelry, but are having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. So make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And going on now is the Blue Nile anniversary sale. So save up to 40% on classic fine jewelry pieces and 25% on engagement ring settings. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that will not give away what's inside. So shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. Okay, so real quick, we're through 20 picks now. I want to get a couple picks that you like and a couple picks that you think were risky. Let's take turns. I think I'm going to go first. And I'm going to say a pick that I like is Kevin Parada. And a couple reasons that I like Kevin Parada at number 11. One is he goes to the Mets, and the comp that I gave was Mike Piazza. So it's a great little bit of correlation there. But I think that the value that you can getting Kevin Parada at 11 gives you the ability to turn around there at 14 and take a Jet Williams, take a prep guy, have a little bit of spending there to try to pick him up. And then just having a guy that is this offensively polished. We've seen his strikeout rate drop just about every year. His power production went up. So down to 9.5% strikeout rate this season. Hit 26 home runs and then had the durability, the physical durability to not get fatigued towards the end of the season. I think his swing is unusual. There's a little bit of a concern there. And then obviously defensively, arm is well below average. He did improve his caught stealing rate. He went from 12% to about 22%, which is higher than I thought it would be. But I'm just not necessarily sure where his mobility, his blocking, and kind of where all that's going to end up. So I'm not sure he sticks at catcher. I think he may end up having to move. But either way, really good pick, player that I'm really high on. And I think at 11, great deal for the Mets. And as a Braves fan, I'm terrified he's going to terrorize us for the next decade now.
It's for me, the standout selection, it goes to the Reds. Cam Collier. I had him number 2 on my board. And a big part of that is he's supposed to be a high school junior right now. Mm-hmm. Not a high school senior. He's supposed to be a high school junior. And he was hanging with 20-year-olds. He was hanging with people much older than him. The Cape experience, was short and he wasn't the best performance, but he did so many good things. And he's got, again, just that son of a player, that approach. When you're looking, you don't want to say it's safe because no one is really safe in the MLB draft, but
right.
It's a strong approach. It's maybe not the most exciting. It's a Cabron Hayes starter package is what I've often said. And there we go. Cardinals with an interesting selection as well as I'm speaking. But yeah, I think the profile is a plus regular at third base and a chance for more. Again, he's just 17. He's doing things at 17 that most 17-year-olds don't do.
Right.
And I think the Reds being able to get him where they got him really it was like I said, I had him number 2 on my board. So they floated him way down there. And to me, he's the player that stands out in terms of this year's so far what we've seen in this draft class.
Yeah. Talking about the pick that just happened, the St. Louis Cardinals take a left-hand pitcher, Cooper Yerpe from Oregon State, which feels like he's a very St. Louis Cardinals type of pitcher. Has a funky movement, but obviously the fastball, slider, changeup, just a lot of what he does, very, very good. And I'm curious to see now, do we get another draft where there's 2 Oregon State players in the first round? Because it's happened once before, believe it or not. But my next guy, as far as people that I like, and I actually hopped on Locked On Pirates a few minutes ago and talked about him, but Tamar Johnson. So big fan of Tamar Johnson, and he's 5'8", 194. So I'm just up front, kind of the negative that we're looking at here is he's pretty much physically maxed out, right? He's not going to grow much more than this. Probably has to move to second base. But one of the best hit tools that we have seen in a decade out of high school. Very good bat speed, very good barrel accuracy, and I think he has a real good chance to be a 70 grade hitter to go along with that 60 grade power that we talked about. So we talked about highest ever prep player drafted at second base. Not going to spend too much time on him because we talked about him earlier in the show, but absolutely a guy that is a very good pick at 4 and going to make the Pirates very happy. Somebody made the joke in the chat earlier, but Nick Gonzalez is definitely sweating because he knows that Tamar Johnson is in this system. So I think it's fantastic. Another pick that you like.
There's a few guys that came down to. I already talked about Chet Williams a bit. So instead, I want to focus on Chase Jung to Detroit. Another one of my top 10 players. We don't know what his position is going to be. I have the sound off. Didn't hear what he was announced as. And there's debate, can he play second? Probably can't handle third, the arm. Where's he going? But I'll tell you what he can do, and that's hit. He just can hit everything that's been thrown at him. Walks at a very high rate. His strikeout rate this year was down under 15% with a walk rate over 20%. Yeah, the power was a little bit down, but I think in terms of just a safe profile, I think he's going to translate. He's going to move quickly, and I think the best is yet to come for him. And I liked him more than Gavin Cross. I thought he was a valuable selection at that point in the draft. And again, he was an 8th player on my board. So I think Detroit made a very smart selection. They got a guy who can line up likely at second base, but worst case in the outfield and get there quickly. I think he is a guy who's going to get there very quickly. And again, if we knew he could play third, he probably was already gone, but there is some concern with that. So Chase Jung is the guy that was just a little bit lower for me, or a little bit higher for me. A little bit lower is what we're going to go to next.
Right. Speaking of, I want to give a guy that I like, and this is the hard part about the draft is it's not just talent, it's money and other things and stuff. So a guy that I like, that I think it's a little bit of a risky pick, is Cade Horton at 7 to the Cubs. So, Cade Horton, I see a lot of in the scenario, a lot of that same thing as Dylan Cease. Had a Tommy John as an amateur. In his case, Cade Horton started this year off playing third base for Oklahoma. He didn't actually get back on a mound competitively until March 29th. And yet, he goes, and he's entirely here because of the College World Series, right? He's only thrown 53 2/3 innings in his college career. He was a 2020. He was a freshman in 2020, lost that year, obviously. He had the surgery. 2021, doesn't do much. But in the postseason, 5 appearances, 31 innings, 2.61 ERA, 49 strikeouts. He looks fantastic in Omaha. And it shoots him up and we talked about this last week when we were talking about pitchers in the top 10, and we said Cade Horton wasn't even on draft boards 2 months ago. And now we're here talking about him as a top 10 pick. And it's something where he's very fastball slider heavy. I don't necessarily think that third pitch is there. And a guy with such a short track record, I like him. I think he's a good pitcher. I just don't necessarily know if top 10 is where I would have drafted him. It feels like it's a jumping on the next hot thing versus a well-scouted and in-depth pick.
No, I agree. It's, like I said, it's interesting just to see a 6'1" right-hander go that high, let alone one who it's only based on the postseason. But yeah, he's up there for me. I'm going to go with the recent selection, Cooper Zerpe. Maybe a surprise that he's a risk, but I don't like unicorns. That's kind of one of those things I've talked about on LockedOn Guardians. That's why I was lower on guys like Tristan McKenzie when he's coming up, because there's literally nobody with his height to weight profile. And there is no starting pitcher in baseball with Cooper Zerpe's release point. They're all relievers. He has a reliever's release point. So the question is, can he be successful? Can he work as a starter? I think he could be. I mean, the floor is high. He has 2+ secondary offerings, and the fastball moves enough that, I mean, you put him in the bullpen, he could be better than what Garrett Crochet has been when healthy for the White Sox. But I think that you're picking I think there's a big risk when you're drafting a guy here. There's a large corner of the industry that already says he's just a reliever. I think I wouldn't do that. I would definitely throw him out there and see if it works, but I'm nervous. I don't bet on unicorns, and for me, I would want he's the guy I'm letting someone else draft.
Yeah. Talking about a guy that I'm letting somebody else draft, and again, I like the player, but I don't necessarily like where he was drafted. Jacob Berry at 6. So I think we can agree offensive talent, he's pretty special. And I think he's going to be a successful big leaguer. But the issue to me is I feel like he profiles at first base or DH. And to take that inside the top 10 feels like you're picking a one-dimensional player. Whereas you absolutely could wait a little bit later in the draft and find similar power production uh, and not have to use the premium of a top 10 pick. And the thing here is like power, of course, tons of power. I mean, has a really unusual stance. He's kind of in a crouch, has his hands above his shoulders, but he can just load it. He can damage fastballs up in the zone, especially from the right-hand side. Kind of can hit to all fields. I think his power is better from the left-hand side than the right-hand side. But the point is, switch hitter. I think they're going to throw him in the. I think they're going to throw him in the outfield. But I just think he probably ends up profiling as a first baseman or a DH because defensively, the speed's not there, the arm's not there, the defensive instincts don't seem to be there. So a little bit questionable to me, not the player, but just taking him in your top 10. Feels like it's a little bit too early to take a one-dimensional guy like that in your top 10.
No, I definitely see that. Like, especially with the talent on the board. I think more than anything else, that's what stood out to me. For me, I'm going to go unconventional again. I'm going to go with a player that most people don't think is risky, and that's Gavin Cross. And again, the value positioning. But here's the thing: college outfielders have a big bust rate. There's a lot of. It's an area that has a lot of I don't know, volatility. And the thing with Gavin Cross is he doesn't have a carrying skill. He does everything well, but nothing great. Mm-hmm. And if I'm drafting in the top 10, I need some carrying skill. Yes, he's got great exit velocity and batting practice. But if I had a dime for every guy who had, better power and batting, had plus power and batting practice that never applied it in the game, I could retire. That's a common thing. How much can they work with him to get more loft in his swing? He's going to be okay in center. He's going to be okay in terms of hit tool. It's 50s or 55s across the board. And something I've always talked about is we talk about players who are safe. And there's this whole feeling that Gavin Cross is safe. Jacob Berry is safe, right? Like the player you just talked about. Those guys aren't safe because when you have average-ish skills or the hope is you're going to present average skills, there's not a lot of wiggle. There's not a lot of room for that player to not develop exactly as expected. And development is not a direct line. And it's like if Jacob Berry doesn't have power as anticipated, like you talked about, you don't have a player there because he can't play anywhere else and he's going to have a profile. Gavin Cross, there's absolutely a way where he becomes a fourth outfielder because he doesn't, he becomes Steele Walker. He becomes someone like that where he doesn't have enough power or doesn't have the right angle for it, but doesn't really have the speed to be anything more than average in center. So then he doesn't profile that. Like, everything has to hit well for him to be a plus regular, which means, he's got to continue to get stronger while not losing any speed so he can profile in center and also tap into his power and a lot of things like that. And I think safety is one of those things that we throw too easily on just a college performer instead of looking at what is going to carry them through the minors.
And then also on that same note, there's also that conversation behind how quickly you take that guy. I actually had Gavin Cross as a player that I liked because the Royals weren't screwing it up, right? The joke that you've had for a couple weeks now is they were going to take Robert Moore, the GM, Dayton Moore's son, at 9. And so to me, it
would have been awesome. It would have been awesome.
It would have been great. It would have been great for the jokes. My first reaction was Gavin Cross was a good pick because it was he's a good player. But you're right that there's not a ceiling. And with the talent that you've brought up recently in Kansas City, with a Vinny Pasquantino and a Bobby Witt and some of these, MJ Melendez, some of these guys that have come up and played, I feel like you're almost past the point where you can settle for safe. You really have to go for ceiling versus floor. A guy that we talked about him a lot in the first segment, but I just kind of want to briefly mention him and give them a chance to flash this amazing graphic. Kumar Rocker at number 3. I initially, when I heard about this Kumar Rocker selection, I did not like the pick. I was against Kumar Rocker at 3, and I think knowing that you got the medicals and knowing that he took a discount, I'm okay with it. Still don't love it, but I'm okay with it. But look at this graphic. This is great. The Locked On team did a great job with this. I think this is absolutely fantastic. So Kumar Rocker. On the topic of pitchers, I want to ask this question to you. So we saw Brandon Barrera just come off the board to Toronto, and he's a guy that removed himself from competition partway through his senior year because he wanted to prepare for the draft and he wanted to avoid the injury risk. Going at 23, when he was considered to be a middle of the first round prospect, so it looks like he fell maybe a little, but not a ton. Do you think that this could have the potential to have more guys start opting out of the high school playoffs where a coach will throw you 5 times in 2 weeks trying to win a championship if they're projected to be high draft picks in baseball?
I mean, it should. You have too many college games or high school games where it's like, hey, we're going for a state championship. I want you to go out there and throw 140 pitches when we go 13 innings. And it's like,
when you started 2 days ago.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, where it's like, I hear people be like, oh, they're not going on anywhere. It's not a big deal. I've seen that happen with kids with scholarship money going to like Big Ten schools, because I'm up here in Wisconsin. So it's like, it happens to those guys. And then, I mean, even if it's just like me, like if I was out there doing that at that age, you can seriously jack up your shoulder forever. And that's the thing. Like, you can go through none of these, for the most part, a lot of these college and high school coaches don't have your best interests. So, I think setting yourself down, avoiding the injury risk, I think he made a smart move. And I don't have a problem with that. I know there's probably already like 4 people in the chat who have issues, but I think it's a smart move.
Okay, so best picks. I gave Jeff Carr a list of my best picks. This is who I had, and of course, Gavin Cross was on there for me because the Royals didn't mess it up. Kumar Rocker, Tamar Johnson, Kevin Parada, best picks of the first round so far, knowing that we've only gone now 24 picks with Mikey Romero being taken at 24 by Boston. Jeff, let me get your best picks. And do you disagree with any of these besides Gavin Cross? We've already discussed Gavin Cross, but do you disagree with any of these besides Gavin Cross?
Before we do this, I don't know if you remember, though, if you go back to our mock, when I talked about Mikey Romero, remember I predicted he'd go in the first round. I said that the league was higher on him than anyone else was, and we see him going right here.
This is why we do this, my guy. This is,
I'm just saying, if you go look at my mock, you're going to be like, he doesn't get anything right. So I want to say there are those things between DeLauter and this. Don't look at my 3 picks right in the mock. I should have had that one there.
And the big thing is, you're not necessarily always going to nail the exact player to the exact team, but you can get the round, you can get guys who are going to rise, guys who are going to fall, and kind of get concepts right for teams. Like, hey, this team's going to take a safe pick, they're going to take a college guy or whatever. And you've done a really good job at nailing a lot of these. All right, so let me get some of your top picks for this first round.
I mean, Gavin Cross is fine. Like, I had him 15th on my board. To me, like, I don't like the Rocker pick. I can't. That's the one that I'm always going to be like. He was like 8th or 9th on my board a year ago. So it's just, it's consistency. I think he's more of a 2-3 type. For me, like, best picks overall, just looking at my own board, it's like you have the Reds,
floating Cam Collier
with Cam Collier. You have both Mets picks, because all 3 of those guys were top 10 players who fell. And then it's the Detroit Tigers with Jung, because all 4 of those picks in the teens were guys I thought were top 10 talents. So those 4 picks in the teens, 2 Mets, 1 Detroit, 1 Cincinnati, were guys that I thought were top 10 players in this class that, other people didn't agree with me. And it's like, again, Gavin Cross wasn't bad. Like, I like Gabriel Hughes, but I had him 30th. Cade Horton I didn't rank because I was like, I'm not paying him his bonus. If I ran a team, I'm not paying him his bonus demands based on one postseason. Kumar Rocker I had at 40 just because I couldn't see his medicals. And I attempted to, like, those are the ones where I'm like, those are like Gavin Cross. I think there's risk, but those aren't the picks. Like, if I'm to make a list of like picks I don't like, it's the other ones. But I think those 4 in particular, it's like Like I said, Jet Williams, if he was taller, he's in discussion for 1-1. Parada, it's question of defense, but that dude can hit. Cam Collier very clearly had a deal in place. Good for him to go where he wanted. And then with Jung, it's again position questions, and he's got moving parts in his swing, which people hate, but dude just produces. And I'm saying dude too much. So
yeah, no, it's cool. Quick preview of what we're going to talk about next. There's a couple guys that we still like on this board, guys that we're really excited about.
I think you got this one right.
From Justin,
going back
who
to our
says
mock.
Spencer Jones.
You nailed this in our mock. I just sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you are. Hey, if you're giving me credit, I absolutely love you interrupting me. Yeah, Spencer Jones from Vanderbilt going to the Yankees. That's a conversation. I talked to a lot of people about that and said, hey, I think this is a pick that might happen. He fits the profile of what they're trying to do, and I like that. In just a minute, we're going to talk about some of the guys that we do like. And Justin, I put the comment up on the screen, has a thing. I'm high on Jacob Melton. I think if he goes in the first round, it would give Oregon State 2 first-rounders again for the second time in their history. But before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and your sports info. You can get the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news. Obviously, they've been a big help for us. And Jeff touched on it earlier in the show. We've seen the odds for the number one pick change multiple times over the last 48 hours. So it's really interesting to be able to kind of track and see who was the favorite to go based on the betting markets. Interesting how that
I even
works.
looked at the over-under spots and used that as a guideline as well. Honestly, like looking at I think Chase Jung was 12.5. Brock Porter was 12.5. But there were some ones like that. It was interesting to see. So there's a lot of fun things. It's not just that top pick. If you go and listen to the mock draft I did and laugh at me about it, you can hear I used all of their data because Vegas has that data that they may not have gotten this one, but they're going to get most.
Yeah. BetOnline is a great source for, whether it's live betting, esports, stuff like it's not just actual games, the draft, obviously. They have all kind of other sports, MMA, boxing, golf. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action because BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, so right now, Spencer Jones at 25 to the Yankees. From this point forward, who were some of your favorite guys who have not been selected, who you think are going to be great players for their teams?
The top player on my board is Drew Gilbert, two-way guy, sure center fielder, has a lot of great tools. Not the biggest guy. Again, I think he's 5'8". I'm not. You might think that I'm small. I'm actually 6 feet tall myself, but I think we often undervalue the smaller players. Like they slide. Mm-hmm.
Our short kings. We love our short kings here.
And it's like, I think Gilbert does. He was mine. I had him. He's by far, he's 11th on my board. So he's the highest rated player. His Tennessee teammate, Jordan Beck, would be number 2 on my board in terms of players left. Cause I think there's, speak it opposite of short kings, Noah Schultz going to the White Sox. But yeah, the back it's interesting because they got the Tennessee coach there, and we haven't really had the Tennessee guys go. Sterling Thompson, outfielder from Florida, Connor Prelip from Bama, and then Dylan Beavers would be my top 5, and a bonus 6 is Justin Campbell. So those are the guys that really stand out for me. And it's interesting now that Mikey Romero is off this board. I try to go find that prep player, and then just underrated. I really like Dalton Rushing the more time I spend on him. I'm just going to state that right now. He is a guy that if I wasn't feeling lazy, I probably would have moved him up the board. Oh, hey, look at that timing right there, right on the streaming board, right as I said it. But yeah, I think he's a really interesting guy.
Want to throw out just real quick about Noah Schultz getting drafted 6'9", 220 as a lefty prep pitcher. Producer Jeff, this is your challenge to go see who's the tallest pitcher in Major League Baseball history. So if you have a second, just go look that up for us real quick. Because Noah Schultz, 6'9", 220. I feel like I should have known this already, but
in the minors, there's Luke Van Meek. I think it's John Ronch in the majors. Mm-hmm. But I think there's this guy who used to pitch for the Guardians, Luke Van Meek. Now I gotta have to find this out. Who was 7 feet tall, but I think it's John Ronch in the major leagues. I actually, this Jeff can answer that one.
There we go. Yep. Nick in the chat says he was 6'10", so there you go. Some of the guys that I'm really a fan of who are still on this board, one of them, I already mentioned him, Jacob Melton. all Pac-12 honorable mention in 2021. Looked even better this year. I got a chance covering Auburn baseball, watching him in the Super Regional play all 3 games in center field for Oregon State. I think he's an underrated player, both power and defense. Left-handed hitting center fielder with power is something that you don't see every day. It's exciting to have that. Oh, we've got Luke Van Mill with 7-1. Thank you to Ethan with LockedOn Pirates, and then LockedOn Giants. Helly was 6'11", so there you go. Yeah. We've had some incredibly tall guys. Noah Schultz is not the only one, but he may be our new tall king. Over something like
I don't know why I was that close to having that in my head. That's almost like a cry for help. I feel like oh yeah, I'm gonna pull out like Look Van. Did this guy Look Van something like that? That shouldn't be that readily available. While I struggle to pronounce like the names of the guys on the Guardians of Points.
That is why you make the big bucks. That is why you make the big bucks, is all this stuff like this. Okay, so yeah, a couple other guys real quick that I think are really great talents that I want to see. Landon Sims, Mississippi State right-hand pitcher, would have been one of the best pitchers coming out of college if not for having Tommy John. You mentioned Connor Prelip. I'm a fan of Connor Prelip as well. He's in a little different boat because he actually got a chance to throw a bullpen for teams right before the SEC tournament. So he had his Tommy John late enough last year where he's mostly back to full health now. Didn't get to compete, but obviously did that. I have a thing for injured pitchers, apparently. Peyton Pillette from Arkansas. Also, there are a couple pitchers that I'm interested in, and I'm just kind of curious what's going to happen. Number 1 is Carson Wisenhunt. Eastern Carolina was suspended for the year. I believe it was reported to be steroids. But then the second guy is pitcher Ben Joyce. And I feel like Ben Joyce is one of the few people that a lot of folks are going to know because of the news about Ben Joyce throwing 103, 104 miles an hour in a game. He topped out at 105.5 this year. And he sits at 101 with his four-seamer. I mean, tons of velocity. The fastball grades out from what I've seen. I think Baseball America had it as plus, and the slider is like an 87-mile-an-hour slider, also plus. Has that big horizontal sweep that I kind of have seen a lot of teams, especially the Yankees, putting into all of their pitchers. Probably the most famous pitcher, not going to go in the first round. But my question is, you take a guy that's very fastball dependent. I mean, fastball, slider's all he's got. So he relies on those 2 pitches. They managed his innings severely. He only pitched on back-to-back days once. He generally got 3 to 4 days between outings. Where do you take a guy like that? Like, where does he come off your board?
For me personally, like in my mock, I had him going to the Padres in round 2. If I am drafting, like he's a day 2 guy for me, just because the last 20 years of history of drafting relievers is not translated. Like we see a lot of these guys go and we think they're going to be, how many guys actually, Brandon Finnegan, who was a starter, not a reliever, but who helped the Royals in the postseason. We don't see a lot of those guys actually translate directly. So I get the stuff is amazing and maybe he breaks the mold, but I've, as I talked about with somebody early on with the unicorn stuff, it's like I'm not betting on someone doing something that almost never gets done. So again, I think he's probably a second round guy, but in my book, he's the one I let someone else draft, which I feel like I'm saying that all the time. So there's probably someone in chat being like, so you're just not drafting anyone. But yeah, relievers, you can go back to like Ryan Wagner with the Reds. I'll throw that one in there for Jeff Carr, as one of those guys that always stands out for me. But yeah, he's not for me just because, again, the history is so limited.
Yeah. Okay. We have a pick in for the Brewers. Eric Brown Jr., the shortstop out of Coastal Carolina.
Great pick.
Yeah, I was about to say somebody who I've been really excited to see where he was going to go. I think he's been underrated by a lot of folks, and just not a lot of people had put him in the first round.
I had him to the Astros in my mock from last night. He's a no doubt shortstop. Like if we talk about when we're talking about Brooks Lee and some of these other guys, and we're like, oh, Tamar Johnson. No, he is a shortstop. He might be the best defensive shortstop in this class. He was really good in the Cape. We can go back and talk about that. He is fast, fluid athlete. He has a weird swing. with a lot of moving parts, and that is why he is here.
It reminds me of Craig Counsell. It's just, I mean, the hands are fully extended up above his head. It's a really weird swing. And like you said, that's why he's here. But I think he's a good 330, 460, 544 this year. Really good. And like you said, definitely going to stick at shortstop. And so, it throws scouts off because it looks odd, but the numbers are there. The metrics are there. It looks like it doesn't look like it's supposed to look, but it produces like it's supposed to produce. So he's another guy that doesn't necessarily fit the mold. We've had guys who are too short in this draft. We've had this, but yet obviously we're still happy with these guys. We think they're going to be great players. We've got a couple more picks to go here in the first round. While we're waiting for these last two picks, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll put Jeff on the spot with some.
So the Astros, are the Astros still here in chat? The Astros just took my favorite player left. The Astros
not on my TV yet.
Oh, it's not. Okay, well, they're. I guess I won't ruin it, but
if you've
been listening to Drew Gilbert to the Astros here, I thought he'd go a lot higher on boards, and just like I said, I had him 11th. He is far and away the highest rated player on my board by large margin, and the Brewers are not the Brewers. The Astros are adding him, so locked on Astros guys. You left at the wrong time. You could have been here, but yeah, they're getting he's a no doubt center fielder. Mm-hmm. He is undersized again. That's why he's here. But
short king, 5'9", 185.
He's got some charge in his bat. He hits it. It's not just like a slap hitter approach, and really good numbers in the SEC. And I really like him overall, and I'm kind of glad he went before his teammate, because typically you'd see Jordan Beck go higher just because he's bigger. But this is a case where, production showed this was he's a no doubt center fielder. Was a guy that maybe the Giants were looking at from what I had heard at various points.
Yeah, so you talk about his production in the SEC: 380, 474, 696, 10 home runs, 20 doubles, hit as many walks as strikeouts. So, absolutely good stuff. You love to see it. And like you said, going to stick there, has a plus arm, plus run times.
He was 92 off the mound as a high school kid in Minnesota, I want to say.
Yeah, just absolutely, and just absolutely like a chance to be an impact weapon and not just a standard center fielder for you. There were a couple questions. I think some of the questions about him, one was his size, and then two, because of his size, we ended up looking at were the exit velos because of the metal bat or aluminum bat and the ballpark they played in, where it seems like everybody crushed 1 million home runs there in Tennessee. But absolutely a great pick. I think I love it. Quick question here for you. Somebody put in the chat. Who do you have the Pirates taking at 36? This is from Ethan, host of Locked On Pirates.
I had Jacob Miller, right-handed pitcher from Liberty Union High School in Ohio, be the first round pick from Ohio since 2012. And I had him, he's got a Louisville commit, and he's been highly rumored somewhere in there. And I thought the Pirates saved money that Miller could be their type of arm. His secondary is outperforming his fastball right now, which is kind of actually cool to see in a high school kid. It makes you think development's going to be a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of where guys are going to go, we have the Giants coming up at 30. And where do you see the Giants going at this point as far as what they need, what they're going to take? To me, this has felt like this might be a good spot for one of those college outfielders. I just don't necessarily know if that's going to be what happens.
In my mock, I had Brock Jones, but I also did not have Jacob Melton still on the board. I think Melton makes a ton of sense just in terms of an analytical front office, looking at a player who's performed at a very high level. I see the question about best names this year. I feel like it's not been a great names draft, if I'm honest.
It has not been a great names draft. I've been disappointed in the names.
It's one of those classes, there's no Itchy Burts. Very sad he never got drafted. That is a real person. I'm not making Itchy Burts. I can't remember where he used to play, but that was one of my favorites. No Hantha Monica, no one like that.
Jet Williams is one of the better ones, and that's not even that exciting.
Yeah, Itchy Burts was, I just looked it up, he was Texas Tech, one of the Texas A&M Corpus Christi was that player. But yeah, Jet Williams is a good one.
Okay, I will give you
Orion Keckering. There we go. Let's go with Orion Keckering.
There is a Thrasher Steed. He's a pitcher out of Gulf Shores, Alabama. I'll give you that. Thrasher Steed is a great name.
That is a good one.
That is a great draft name. We've got, it looks like we've got about what Tampa Bay's pick is in. So Tampa Bay graduated a ton of guys out of this system, it feels like recently. Have guys right now they can't find playing time for. Vidal Brujan keeps moving back and forth between AAA and the bigs. He goes Durham, he goes to Tampa, back to Durham. Played her all over the diamond. What does Tampa Bay need for this system? Do they need more pitching since they've graduated McClanahan and Boz and a couple other guys? Or where do they go here?
I thought they were in a place to get pitching. Like I was mocking them because they have a bunch of picks. Like maybe they'd be the one who take Dylan Lesko if he slid. Brock Porter is staring us in the eye. And remember they took Nick Bitsko a few years ago. You already missed the Gilbert talk. Astros, I was sitting in here saying you need to be in here. He's the number one player left on my board when they took him. I love him to death. If he wasn't 5'9", he'd have gone much higher. Two-way guy, has that arm. It's a fantastic pick. 11th overall rated player on my board. They got him there. If he wasn't 5'9", he would have gone 10 picks higher.
When this is over, I'll come hop on your show and we'll talk about it, Astros. Okay, trust me. Great pick. Yeah, it's the Rays to me are the organization where I feel like you can take a pitcher with just tools and develop them into a great professional pitcher. And you see so often they take these guys who are really raw, but they've got a couple of elite tools and they just transform them into a guy like a Shane McClanahan or like a Shane Boz, or maybe you just have to have a name like Shane. I think that might be the thing here. But they've got so much depth in the farm system. And fun fact, last year they had the winningest minor leagues of all time. 3 of their 4 minor league affiliates won the championship. The 4th one played for the championship, and the winning percentage was the best collectively of any minor league organization in modern baseball history. So tons of talent there.
I think the sleeper here, system. If you want one, is Jacob Mizorowski, the Crowder JC JUCO pitcher. You talked about just ceiling and the like. How about a guy who already hits 100 right now with spin rates and vertical break, and he's 6'7". He's supposed to go to LSU, but rumor is he's going to go somewhere in these next 10 to 15. If you want a real under the radar guy for the selection, Jacob Mizorowski would be the guy to look at.
Xavier Isaac, who is somebody that we talked about as one of those first baseman / DH kind of guys.
That's of very high for him.
That is very high for another one of those one-dimensional, like polarizing. You have to hit for power because that's the only thing you have. And like this, he feels like he's probably one of the highest risk reward guys in this entire draft. So
he's he's built like a defensive tackle. But it's like first base only prospect. That's the risk profile. That's very interesting. I didn't see that. I mean, again, he's 6'4", 240. He's a big dude.
He's a big boy.
Outside of power, there's a carrying tool. I didn't have this. This is the most surprising first round pick because this is the only player in the first round so far that is like no one had that first round grade. So that's interesting. I mean, we never know bonuses and the like. But yeah, that's the first guy really in this. It's the first guy drafted, let's put it this way, outside of like Cade Horton, where there were other reasons who was not in my top 50.
Yeah. And it's something where, I think he had a foot injury. And so he didn't do showcases and stuff in 2021. So we haven't really seen him against top competition either. He's playing in North Carolina. But great note in the chat. We've seen 12 college position players taken out of the first 29 picks. Obviously, Giants are coming. As soon as the Giants pick, we're going to go ahead and do our riskiest picks of the draft. Actually, let's go ahead and do that now because Giants will be a minute.
And they won't be risky. It's the Giants.
They won't be risky. It's the Giants. They're not going to get out of this board. I'd have added Xavier Isaac if I had known he was going to come
Yeah,
in the first round. He'd be on there for sure. But let's go ahead and put up the
agreed.
graphic, producer Jeff, on the riskiest picks. So we kind of talked about some of this. I had Cade Horton because of the lack of uh, of track record. I had Jet Williams. Some of the questions based off of size. Obviously, you talked about you think Jet Williams is a really good pick. Jacob Berry is being one of those safe, but too safe to do in your top 10. And then Gabriel Hughes, I think we both kind of talked about some of the issues there. Give me some of your riskiest picks for this draft.
So again, I mean, Xavier Isaac would be one just
Yeah.
because of it's again, he's the only
one.
guy outside of, and then, Horton as well, because I didn't rank him because of my concerns with the risk and the lack of exposure. And then just kind of as I go through the list, Noah Schultz, also, I lied. He also wasn't ranked for me. And it's just because after you get past 6'7", the rate of breakdown, like those big pitchers, we always think, yeah, they have a late release point. So, and it works out like Sean Jelly, former Kentucky pitcher who's with the Giants. But he was always a soft tosser, like in spite of his size. Like you get that late release point, it makes your fastball actually seem faster. But so many of those guys have problems repeating their mechanics, or they break down. There's a lot of inherent issues. It could be great. He could be an absolute monster, but kids that big, it is always something that there's just greater risk. And then Cooper Gerpe, like
Cooper Yerby.
can he Herpy, but it's like, can he start? I don't know. I think it's all relative in risk because you don't want to take a first rounder and then be a reliever. But at the same time, like half these guys probably won't even be regular. So if he's just a very good reliever, that's actually decent value. Yeah. But when you draft them, you're drafting with the hope for a starter. And again, you're counting on a guy whose release point, the only people who have release points like his are relievers. There are no starters with that release point.
Yeah. Back to the Xavier Isaac thing. First baseman picked in the first round since Nick Prado in 2017. And I say that Tristan Casas was drafted as a third baseman in 2018 and was moved to first base by the Red Sox. So first baseman picked in the first round since 2017 to Nick Prado. And Nick Prado actually played over the weekend for the Royals.
Because of all of their
in Toronto because they lost a lot of guys. Yeah. So he's been one that worked out, but
speaking like of conservative,
really tough. Oh,
Dylan Beavers. We do end with a California kid staying in state. It wasn't Brock Jones, wasn't Jordan Beck, wasn't Jacob Melton, but it was another interesting. The outfield group is really interesting in this class, and there are still all of those names. So even if while we're moving to the end of the show, both of us on our, on LockedOn Prospects and myself on LockedOn Guardians, we're going to be talking about this draft probably for days. So make sure to keep tuning in because there's a lot of interesting players. There's a lot. I mean, is Brock Porter unsignable, or is Brock Porter in a Cam Collier situation where somebody's paying him? Like, could he be being floated down for one of those teams like, I wouldn't say Texas, but someone else who went, massively under slot? Or could the Reds just go crazy because they have, every third pick in this draft? We'll have to kind of wait and see. But yeah, I think, Beavers was it's funny because he was almost always linked and mocked to Oakland. So he thought he was going to the Bay, just the other side now.
Yeah. All right. So if folks want to keep up with all of your draft content and Guardians content throughout the week and going forward, how can they do that?
You can hit me up on Twitter at JeffMLB Draft, nice and simple, or subscribe to LockedOn Guardians. The YouTube is always appreciated. We're getting close to 400 subscribers, so I appreciate any who jumps in or subscribing to the pod. I thank you to everyone, and thank you to Jeff for doing the grunt work behind the scenes, and for Lindsay for being the pilot of this whole thing. I get the easy job. I just show up and talk too much. I don't have to do anything. So I appreciate just being the guy who just shows up and rambles. So, I mean, the Jeff and Lindsay have to actually do the work of the day. So just big kudos to them both.
Absolutely. Thank you. I am the host of Locked On MLB Prospects.
No, it was wrong.
That was not the pick?
No. It is the riskiest pick in the entire draft. Just happened. I was wrong.
Reggie Crawford.
That is fascinating.
We've got time to talk about this. I was
Oh,
going to plug my pod, but let's talk about Reggie
sorry.
Crawford real quick.
I got bad info.
No, you're
Uh,
good. You're good. Let's talk about Reggie
I was
Crawford real
looking
quick.
at just to give a shout out to at Joe Doyle MILB. He's been on top of most of these, and that's where I was looking. Crawford is
Yeah.
fascinating.
6'4", 235, 21 years old. Had TJ and missed the whole season.
Yeah, he's thrown like 20 innings in college, but he's a lefty, athletic. He spent more time at first base than he has at catcher. He was like 50th on my board, or 51st, just because the risk. We don't know, but he hits 100. He's thrown 20 innings in his 3 college years, but he hits 100 miles an hour. And some people think the slider is going to be plus as well. He's mostly been a hitter, a first baseman, but a good athlete. Lefties like him, you don't find them. Could be an underslot deal too. Could be some savings. He was supposed to go to Tennessee. I guess that's another loss to a Tennessee program. He was filmed in there. He took some pictures this week, got some free swag. But that is an absolute. That's your riskiest pick in the entire draft. You're talking about a guy with 20 total innings, barely pitched, already 22 years of age.
Yeah, I mean, not a guy I expected to see in the first round. I was thinking maybe we'd see him early tomorrow, and even then, I was a little worried. That was. I mean, talent, like you said, it is hard to find a lefty who can touch 99.
Before his injury, I had him as like in that top 10.
Yeah, and then like you said, played first base, hit 309 at first base with 14 home runs, but still just a guy that incredibly risky because you've barely seen him throw, and they announced him as a pitcher, and so obviously this is. Maybe they're thinking the fallback is first base if for some reason he can't pitch. So that's why they're okay with the risk, or it's an underslot thing, and we'll see. Anyway, we're going to have more about this draft all week. You can follow me. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. My show is on Twitter at LockedOn Farm. You can subscribe to LockedOn MLB Prospects wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Again, big shout out to producer Jeff from LockedOn Reds in the background there helping us out. And if you have questions for the show, you have questions about your team's draft, we're going to be covered, and I'm sure, but send those to us on Twitter. Jeff Ellis is on Twitter at Jeff MLB Draft. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Thank you for tuning in to the Locked On MLB Live MLB Draft Show. Y'all have a good night.